Hey everyone, welcome to the Tabletop Design board game panel hosted by Talking Cardboard. Thanks for being here. Everyone give yourselves a round of applause for showing up. I know this was early for many of you, and I know many of you maybe had a great night at CONvergeance last night, so thanks for waking up early to be here. So what got you into board game design? And now we'll start in artwork. We'll start with Jeremy here.
Cool. So I think we're just kind of talking with friends. So Matt, Ethan, and I kind of grew up together. We went to school together, and then we were talking about just playing games one day, and we're like, what's stopping us from making a game? And we kind of just started talking like that, and then we ended up having the idea for a horror board game, which became The Stifling Dark. So really it was just a conversation while we were playing games. We're like, hey, we all love doing this. We want to start a company. What's kind of holding us back from doing that? And the answer was really nothing. So we just kind of took it from there. Over the course of a couple of years, started to iterate on it, tested it, went to conventions, and then we released it. So it was literally just a conversation. There was no big plan. It was just a conversation around the table that got us into it, and then we've been doing it now for 5 years. So just started off like that.
Nice. So again, I spent years insisting that I was never going to design a game. I was a board game reviewer. I had a podcast. I liked talking about games. I liked analyzing games. But in my mind, that was never going to translate to making a game. And then I spent too much time face chatting with David Thompson in the morning before work. And we eventually decided, you know what, let's try it. Like, why don't we make a game? And so we decided to make a game about the Night Witches, the Soviet female bombers flying harassment missions against Nazis in World War II. And it was just such a fun concept. I couldn't help myself. And so we made one game, and then we made another game. And then I got a job making games. And it just, I feel like, it feels sometimes like I jumped in without any warning, but now I look back and I realize all those conversations I was having about games and things I thought could improve the game, it was all there. I just had to accept that was what I wanted to actually be doing.
For me, it was the money. That's a joke, but so it actually was kind of when like iOS started releasing apps and they got popular. I was like, I could do that. So developed an app, sent it out to friends, and realized that kind of iterating on the idea took a lot of time. Took like all the different avenues, like art, like game design, like coding. All that was a learning curve. So it was such kind of a fresh relief, like a breath of fresh air to kind of take it out of the digital environment and see people's faces when you played with them on the table. You could iterate really fast, and I said, this is much better than the software side of things, so I'm going to go here. And I kept doing it. So
I kind of came at it from the opposite direction of everybody else at the table. It sounds like people went independent and kind of got into it that way. I was corporate to start. I was doing like corporate marketing and sports mascot stuff, and then I saw a job opening at Fantasy Flight and went over there as a marketing graphic designer, and immediately was like, I want to work on actual games. So after I put in a couple years in the marketing department, I moved over into development, and then I was working on doing graphic design for actual games at FFG, and then eventually became a manager, and then eventually we had a team of my own of artists and graphic designers. And then after about 10 years at Fantasy Flight, which would become Asmodee, left the company, teamed up with a former co-worker, co-manager at Z-Man, and he had an idea for a game, and we had built enough inside industry knowledge that we felt like we could do it on our own. So we put together Leviathan Wilds about 4 or 5 years ago, and then went the crowdfunding route with it, and that's where we're at right now. We're about 4 or 5 years into that.
Great, thanks guys. We'll snake around, so we'll start with Sam for this next question. What are some networking opportunities you recommend for board game designers or board game artists?
Oh man, networking opportunities. I would say stuff like this, and just talking to anybody who's around. I always found that it was advantageous for my own internal development at the company that I was working at, and more broadly in the industry, just being interested in what other people are doing and talking to them and asking questions and kind of finding common ground across multiple disciplines and stuff. I was in the art department, the graphic design department, marketing departments, but I was always talking to other people in other departments and trying to learn more about what other people were doing in the space. And I think that's probably the strongest advice that I would give anybody.
For me, I would recommend Protospiel events. They're kind of like around the nation, a bunch of different cities, but great mix of hobbyists and kind of professionals in there. But where I got started with the networking side of things was like meetup.com, just kind of going to local board game meetups where people would host and teach you a game, and I'd bring a game and I'd teach it, and there were some, tailored to kind of design as well. So that's where I got started.
Sam, I think you have the right of it, in that being interested in what other people are doing, I think, is the core of networking. I think when we think about networking, it sounds really stressful because you think, oh, well, how do I get this person to give me the attention that I want or the opportunity that I want? But it never really seems to work that way. I mean, for me, the best move I could have made was I made a podcast. The easiest thing to get from people is their time if you want to talk to them about who they are, what they do, and what they're interested in. And, just having real conversations with people about why they're doing the things that they're doing, or, what's going into their work, I have found very, very useful, as opposed to wanting them to notice me, if that makes sense. I also think that just for me, going to cons has always been a big thing, even local ones. Being part of a local scene where you know people and you go to a convention and you comfortably fall in with a friend, or you end up playing a lot of games and you see the person who demoed that game later. All those little connections, if you just show up because you want to be there, eventually can weave themselves into something surprising. I never thought that I was going to quit being a public school teacher and go into full-time board game work. That was a very lucky break for me, but it was also luck that I had prepared to accept by being around and doing the work anyway for a long time.
Conventions are important. I'd also add, if Trevor's watching this, he'll be happy, but there's a design day meetup that happens twice a month, and I know Nate's here from that as well. But that happens essentially every other week at the Source up in Roseville, and so that's where I met a lot of local designers, and again, just getting to know people, talking to them, and just being present is the key. It's not like a task you have to go and, hey, I'm gonna network with 5 people today. It's more about just naturally letting it happen by being at those events, talking to people, asking them about the games they like, what they're trying to do. So think of it more as just relationship building than a task you have to do. But conventions, design day meetups, meetup.com, any of those options, you just need to be present, and it kind of naturally happens from there.
Great, good answers, everyone. We'll start with Jeremy for this next question, which is, and this is more, definitely more niche because it's a personal gripe of mine a lot with board games, is you have a well-designed board game, and if it's played correctly, it's a great experience, but sometimes the rule book doesn't translate that. So how do you ensure a poor rule book doesn't ruin a great game design? So I'll start with you, Jeremy.
Yeah. So we've actually, this feels like a targeted question. So some of the we got, some of the feedback we got with Stifling Dark was the rulebook could use some work, and we are taking that to heart. We're kind of modifying some things and kind of streamlining it a bit, but this is probably one of the hardest parts. You have this game you have all these ideas for it, and it's how do you communicate those ideas that are in your head into a sheet of paper or multiple sheets of paper? And really it's about testing. So one, making sure, again, you're getting out there. So we were play testing it. You kind of start internally with your team, then you go out to kind of friends and family, then you go to the general public. And so we kind of follow that same path, play testing at conventions, with friends, with family, and then blind play tests are essential. Once you have that rulebook ready, doing blind play tests and just giving the game to somebody and saying, play the game, take your notes. I'm not going to say anything, or maybe I'm not even going to be there, but making sure they can play the game by themselves with the rulebook, and then getting that feedback for them to say, okay, this was confusing, or this didn't work. And then hiring an editor and proofreaders as well. So making sure you have other people, you can kind of build the initial draft of the rulebook, but you want somebody that has more experience in that. So we have hired editors and rulebook designers to take care of that. But really, I think the key thing is blind play testing. Making sure other people can play your game without you giving them advice. That's the real test of, does your rulebook work or does it not?
Yeah, I also think that blind play tests are crucial. I've not been through this as part of my work at Leader before, but I know that we're about to enter usability testing for the Oath expansion. And so that is something that we practice, and I'm really looking forward to figuring out how that happens at work. But I also enjoy freelancing, and my favorite freelance task actually is editing rulebooks. I love to edit rulebooks. It really brings me joy. I think it's the former teacher in me. But I think for me, it's hire an editor, and like I can't edit my own work, so I write rulebooks for games that I've designed. Somebody else has to edit it. Get an editor, because they will see things that you can't see anymore in your own writing, because you're looking at a game and you're understanding 100 different versions of the game as you look at it, because it's been through so many iterations. Or you auto-corrected something in your head because you knew what you meant, but somebody else has to look at the rulebook. And I also. Okay, maybe this is just me being cranky, but if you don't know your game well enough to explain it well, how good is the game? Like, it should be, you should know, like, what order do you like to teach this game in? When you get other people to play it with assistance from you, like, does your rulebook reflect any of that? Or, you have to think about, you can't be there, right? So how should you present things, and are you expressing your game clearly enough? And if you're not, why? Because if you can't, then that's a design problem that we've been talking about actually as we work on Oath. Like, is there a problem expressing what's happening in this game with graphics? Are we having a problem expressing this verbally? And if we are, why? And like, what roughness is like a little bit wrong in the game that's making it hard to communicate, as opposed to just assuming that it'll all work itself out? If you're running into friction in your rules, pay attention to it beyond just wording, because there could be a little bit more dev that needs to happen if you're really having a hard time explaining something.
So I have a contrarian take on this, I think. I would maybe invert the question, and I think like one of the ways that I define a great game design is a game that actually is fun to play even if you play it with the wrong rules. And I think like about 95 to 97% of games are probably played with the wrong rules. And the ones that really, stick, I think, are the ones where like you get a little rule wrong and it's still great. So an example here is every time my parents bring Azul to they come visit, they bring Azul. They play it different every time. And I'm like, you guys are just driving me nuts. Like, how are we playing it today? It's super fun every time. And like whatever they're doing, I'm like, all right, we'll fall in the line with your rules because you've been playing it, this way this year. And it's still so fun. So I think that to me is the metric of a great game design.
Sure.
Is you actually like can't mess up the rules need to be a base layer, but that to me is the signature.
I have I guess slightly different take as the art guy. Luckily, the writing of the rules is not my responsibility. That would be a bad scene. But I do have, like with my background in marketing, I bring kind of a polish level to the table. So my partner Justin writes rules, and like I'll kind of go through them, and I'm responsible for graphics and stuff. So from my perspective, it's about like clear graphics, making sure that things are readable. If you're doing stuff in 3D, making sure that your perspectives aren't weird, like that your stuff looks accurate. And if it's not accurate, it should be not accurate in a way that improves readability. So for example, if I'm making like 3D graphics that represent game pieces, they might not be photoreal, but I'm gonna like put hard outlines on stuff. I'm gonna make things glow if I want to draw attention to it. I want to make sure that things draw the eye in the correct order, all that sort of stuff. But I think generally speaking, making good rules involves a lot of iteration and reiteration and reiteration and reiteration. It's about I think like anything else, and this is true of art as well, start with very rough drafts and then revise and revise and revise. Don't get caught up on the fine details immediately. That way lies madness and a lot of wasted time, but just, throwing out a skeleton of things, like what are the main points, and then iterating on those and making them more clear over time. And then again, like the other panelists have said, playtesting, running the rules by other people, getting other perspectives from other people is pretty critical too, because you'll write something or present something in a certain way, and you put it in front of a different person and they have a completely different perspective on it, and then suddenly what you've done is like broken in some way that you didn't expect, and you need to be really humble and very open to feedback and willing to change.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Sam, because I do think you can't underestimate the importance of the visual aspects of rules too. Like I think of Avalon Hill's games from the 80s and 90s. I have this game called Blackbeard and Republic of Rome. Really cool games, but their rules are just paragraph after paragraph, no visuals. It's really hard to understand, and I think the rules are probably all there, but it's just, it's hard for me to internalize as maybe more of a visual learner. And then just the other day, I was putting together this little basketball hoop for my toddler, and there's stickers that go on the basketball hoop. And it had this nice sticker sheet, and it had the number of the sticker, and then this little, model of the hoop, and this number then on that hoop of where the sticker's supposed to go. A very simple thing. Didn't even need words to explain it. So as a user, as a user who's played board games, I would say if you're going to design a game, make sure that you consider the visuals of how you want to disseminate the rules of your game. Okay, so anyway, we'll move on here, starting with Sam this time, with the question, things to consider when deciding to either self-publish or to find a publisher for your game. And Sam's kind of been on both sides of that.
Yeah, I have been on both sides of that. That's a tough question for me to answer because most of my time has been spent working for a publisher, and I've seen a lot of prototypes come in to the development department and get reviewed by the internal people who review games, and they're reviewing hundreds of games a year. So finding a publisher is really I would say it's probably pretty challenging, although I don't know what it's like at other studios that are not Asmodee.
So I've done both. My business model kind of operates where I publish one of my designs and then I publish someone else's design. But I've also pitched designs to other companies and had a game signed and published through someone else. So I've seen kind of both sides of it. For me, I always put a lens on do I think this fits in the brand or not? So I have enough titles in my catalog that I can say, is this a good fit? But I think really what it boils down to is what work do I want to invest in this title and what kind of work do I want to invest? So finding a publisher is a pretty big matchmaking job. You really got to find someone who's going to fall in love with it, get invested, treat it like their own baby, because when you self-publish it, you certainly can treat it like your own baby, and you can take as long as you want, and you don't have timelines, and you don't have you can kind of just blossom it into what you want to make it. So I think for me, I always look at it, does it fit the brand first, but then if you don't have a brand, if you're kind of starting from square one, do I pitch it to a publisher or do I self-publish? How can you let it go? How much control do you want is I think what I think about, yeah.
I really admire people who self-publish because I don't know that I have the skill set to do that. I mean, to figure out who's going to print it, how do I get the files even ready for that? Do I find an artist? I'm not a good graphic designer. How do I get that to work? Who's going to edit my rules? Who's going to put the money down to hire all of the right people to make that game into a good product? Yeah, I'm not equipped for that. And so I'm only ever finding publishers. So obviously I really, really enjoy being on the publisher side at Leader, but I also have an independent design life, and I just pitch games. Get a game to a place where I think it's ready to show to somebody, look around at the options and think about who might be a good match, and set up some meetings, because I am not equipped to talk to a factory or hire an artist, it's a really incredible amount of work. It's like authors who now say I wanted to write books, I don't know how to do social media and my own marketing campaign and all. I think it's maybe hard sometimes to make that connection with the publisher, but having somebody who actually knows what they're doing, treats your game well, is an incredible privilege that I enjoy, and I do not publish my own things.
Somebody does publish games.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we self-published our first game and then we published our second game. So we've kind of done, I've never gotten my own game published, but we just self-published Stifling Dark. The question I would ask is, do you want to start a business? That's the way I think about it. So if you self-publish, you are, as Liz just said, you are doing the manufacturing, you're doing the fulfillment, you're doing the taxes, you're doing everything else, hiring artists, hiring rulebook editors. It is basically a business, and my job at this point for Sophisticated Service is just running the business. I don't do a whole lot with the design anymore because Matt and Ethan handle that. There's enough work to be done from a taxes, from a social media, from a customer service, manufacturing, so on and so forth perspective. And I enjoy it, which is part of the reason why I wanted to self-publish a game, is to start that business. But it is a business you're running. We have to file taxes all over the world. We have to handle shipments. We have warehouses in different countries. So it is a lot of work, but it's also really rewarding. I mean, Adam, you hit on this as well. Like, you get control of your game. So we were approached by publishers for Stifling Dark, and we said no, because we wanted to keep it the way we wanted it. So I think if you want full control of the game, self-publishing is really the only option. But also there's tons of benefits of getting published as well, because you're not running a business. You can be as involved or as not involved as you want. When we publish games, we always ask, how much do you want to be involved in the game? You could literally just sign this contract and say, I'm done, or you can help us all the way through the crowdfunding campaign and then fulfillment. Like, that's totally up to the designer. So really depending on the publisher, you could be as involved or as not involved as you want. And so there's benefits of both sides. We just kind of stuck with the publisher route because that's what we wanted to do. But if you're not interested in the business, if you just enjoy designing games, I would strongly encourage you to publish versus self-publish. Because once you start doing the publishing route, then you're doing a lot more business than you are game design. If your passion is game design, then I would stick to the pitching route, because then you can just keep doing what you like doing and not worrying about manufacturing, taxes, logistics, all that fun stuff.
Really appreciate the insight, guys. That was actually really good. Thank you for those answers. Now we'll go to like specific questions for each of the panelists, starting with Jeremy here. So Stifling Dark uses a very novel component to simulate a flashlight being turned on. I should have put up a picture of it. I apologize for that, guys. But if you ever look up Stifling Dark, you'll see like this real cool component that's kind of like a cone shape, and it represents the flash, like a physical representation of a flashlight, and it, depending on where it's oriented on the board, that's what you visibly can see as the playing characters. So did the idea to have a component like this come first, then the rest of the theme, or was the theme first, then later the idea for such kind of component? I'm asking this because I could imagine if you're designing a game, you may have this novel idea of a component that could be used for a game, but anyway, so I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, this is the age-old theme versus mechanic question. So some people start their designs with a mechanic, some people started with a theme. We started Stifling Dark with a theme. So we decided we wanted to do some sort of horror game, and that's kind of how the game started. And then from there, we figured out we want this to be hidden movement. So we have one person playing kind of behind a screen, everybody else is trying to find or hide from that person. And from there, we're like, how do we incorporate some sort of line of sight mechanic into a horror game? And that's where the concept of flashlight came up. You're playing it, and at night you can't see things unless you use your flashlight and shine it around the map. And so we went through many iterations of like, how should we do line of sight? Should we just do a straight line? Should we do colored circles? Should we do this or that? It took many iterations before we kind of landed on the flashlight, and even then we went through a bunch of iterations of it. Is it a hex map? Is it a square? Is it what we ended up with is like a circle hex grid is what I would call it. But that's kind of how we start with the theme, and then we worked our way into the flashlight, and that kind of became the main mechanic. And we're known as the flashlight game now.
Really?
So
Okay.
so there's the flashlight. That's what people at conventions remember. It's one of those things that draws people in at conventions. Of like, what's that? And a lot of people are like, is that a flashlight? I'm like, it sure is. So that's kind of how we represent line of sight in the game, and it took quite a while, but we're really happy with how that worked out. It's a really kind of a unique way to represent line of sight in a game.
Okay, cool. But when designing a game, are you thinking about the manufacturability, which it was red underlined, so I don't think that's a word, but I went with it anyway. Manufacturability, and any insights you care to share from past experiences. And I'm asking this to Adam because right here, Planet Unknown uses this, I'm just realizing this now, a Susan component that rotates, and Lazy Susan, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's a play on Lazy Susan.
You got it. It's a play.
Yeah. But then Sword Crafters also uses some cool components. And
Yeah, so my brand kind of requires a unique component to be in the line, and so we start. You said theme and mechanics. I would add another one and say, do you start the game design with component? And so that's a lot of times how we'll start kind of the crafting the idea. The concept is like, wouldn't it be cool to have this component in a game? It doesn't always happen like that, but even if a game is signed into into the company, I'm always like, well, how can I add a cool component? So I actually have a little show and tell on this one. I wasn't planning this, but I had this with me. So there's a game we're working on right now. It's called Five Squires. You're like a squires. You're a knight of the round table drafting your squires for the game. And so it's just a card game, and I'm like, well, this doesn't really fit the brand, but it's a great game. How can we add a unique component to this? And so I came up with this idea where, every card game probably needs like some packaging, right? So we need a tray for the game, right? But this is Knights of the Round Table, Squires of the Round Table. So what if you flip it upside down and all of a sudden now the tray becomes a table? And I'm like, well, now that's cool. I can 3D print that. Did it, works great. Everyone loves it. Now, how do I manufacture it, right? Because you can imagine if this is probably like a plastic 3D print. It doesn't necessarily translate to manufacturing. So you break this down to its components. So for example, this is going to be manufactured with a plastic thermoform or a vacuum mold. It's going to draw that plastic down, heat it up, draw it down, form it into the tray. But now you can imagine you want it to look like a table. So how do you get that? It's just going to look like a piece of plastic or a tray. So if you flip it upside down, you can sort of add a ridge or add some material on top. You can imagine now you can print on that material, and so now the multi component, the composition of the two materials, plastic and whatever printed cardboard, could get you there a lot quicker, right? So and then you're like, well, okay, maybe it's a color choice on the table. Now we need to add some like old table aesthetics, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what goes into it. You look at the cool thing and you're like, how do you break that down into the components that we know work really well? And thankfully, so I was kind of trained in like packaging engineering for my schooling, and so I've like walked factories in China, and so I can really break down most of what I see on a table and say, here's how I would do it, and here's if I need two components together. And so, for example, that Lazy Susan in Planet Unknown has nine parts to it, and so I think it's a very complex system to sort of get it to work. And like I had to like rip Lazy Susans apart and see how they were all designed, and see what things I could sort of get off the shelf, and see what things I needed to make custom. And all in all, it was probably a $20,000 capital investment to make that single component. But it really makes it stand out on a table, and I don't think really any other game compares to it in terms of like high player count, simultaneous play, polyominoes, it really, I think it sets it apart in that manner. So I think that's really what I looked at when designing and integrating and manufacturing that thing as well. So.
Thanks for that in-depth answer, Adam. Appreciate that. So, Sam, when it comes to artwork, is there a prioritization you normally follow, such as you make the card, design out the cards and the board? Also, something I was just thinking about the other day is how much effort is spent on the box art, because I know as a buyer, when I'm going through a store, that I may or may not pick up a box purely just because of how it looks, which I know is not how you judge a book, but that's just the reality of board gaming. So that's another kind of separate question, but yeah.
I think it's probably going to vary a lot between art directors and artists and graphic designers, like what they'll prioritize. But for my part, going back to my comments about rule books, I really try to work broad and very rough. I don't invest a lot of time into any particular detail until the time has come that I'm confident that time investment is going to be worthwhile. So I will try to basically skin a whole game, graphic design first, because that's the most important thing for making the game function. For artwork, it's then like storyboards. For Leviathan Wilds, like I did all the art, and that was over 100 illustrations. On top of all the graphic design, on top of the component design and the packaging and the marketing and all of that. So it was just a lot to fit into my schedule to do that stuff. So I storyboarded it all extremely rough, and then kind of once everything else was working well, I went through and then finished each piece. And I'm kind of doing the same thing for expansion content, although I'm trying to get storyboards into the game a little sooner so that playtesters and as we playtest our own material, can review it kind of as we go. As far as cover art is concerned, I've had a lot of hits and misses in my career with cover art. I've directed a lot of cover art. I've done a handful of pieces myself. I have had people working for me do cover art. And I mean, you can make what you think are really great decisions, you can be a really great artist, and you can completely still miss, and people will not like it. Conversely, you can knock it out in an afternoon and accidentally make the best cover art that anyone's ever seen. It's art is a very volatile craft in general. It like Adam was talking about with iterating on components and stuff, sometimes stuff just works really well. Sometimes you have a really clear idea and it just all falls together quickly, and then sometimes you've got this great idea and it's completely wrong. You print it up or you mock it up and it just doesn't work at all the way that you expected, and then you're going back to the drawing board multiple times. It looks like there's a question. What?
Yeah, how do you test your art, and how do you test failure?
Well, for me, I'm part of a duo / trio. It's me and Justin as the co-founders of the studio, and then we have a developer that we've hired to do, who's working part-time. So Justin will tell me if he thinks something is terrible, and I encourage him with my whole voice to be honest with me. That's the hardest part, I think, is for a game designer and developer to learn to be confident in telling an artist that he thinks their work is bad. Vice versa, like me telling Justin that I think a design isn't quite working the way that it could as the artist. It's taken me a lot of experience in that space to build the confidence to tell somebody else who's doing a job that's not my job that they really could do better. But yeah, that feedback, that open conversation. I share artwork with my partner. I send artwork to my artist friends occasionally if I want some feedback. It's all about showing other people, I think, for the most part. And another tool that I use frequently is sleeping on it. I'll do a draft. I'll leave it alone for a day or a week or a month, and then come back with fresh eyes and look at it again. The development timelines for stuff when you're doing it with two to three people is pretty long, because there's a lot to do and things take a lot of time. So I have a lot of opportunities to kind of shelve things and then come back later and look at them. And sometimes later in the process, when you look at stuff you did earlier in the process and it's just not passing muster, that can be kind of painful, because you thought you were done and then you're not done.
Okay, I just really wanted to also, and for anyone not familiar with Leviathan Wild, put up the artwork here. I couldn't get one good image, so I'm kind of showing you a smattering, but I just personally think it looks great, and that box is one that pops out on a shelf in a game store, so that's part of the reason why I was asking Sam that question. But the rest of the components also, the art for everything else looks great too.
I was nervous going into that cover art piece,
Really?
because I haven't done a ton of cover art myself from the art perspective.
Yeah, sure.
My career is mostly graphic design,
Yeah.
with illustration kind of on the side. And with that piece, it was kind of that's the make or break thing for our whole studio. 'Cause
Yeah.
we just went solo, and this is our first product.
Yeah.
So yeah, I put in way more hours on that.
Well,
than
I think it turned out.
many people would.
And yeah, so, no, thanks
To
for
the
that.
point where my business partner is like, should we be hiring a freelancer for this?
No, I want to do it.
All right, so next question's for Liz. All right, so Liz, as a female game designer, and as many maybe are aware, there's not so many female game designers in the industry designing games that highlight female protagonists. You talk about Night Witches, of course, and then
Queen of Spies.
Queen of Spies. What other actions do you see being taken or should be taken to encourage more female game designers? I have 2 daughters. Corey has 2 daughters, so.
I hate this question. I'm blunt. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna tell you, I hate this question. I don't want to be on your JV squad. I want to be your favorite designer, not your favorite female designer. And I have very strong feelings about that.
Okay.
I'm not mad at you, but I'll answer.
Well,
the
I
question.
mean, like, but you understand what I'm saying, right? There's not many female game designers that.
Oh, I'm aware.
Yeah.
And I love being the token member of this panel, but.
Well, I didn't want you to be a token member.
I'm sorry. I love you very much, but.
Love you, Liz.
All right, so. Okay, I think it's actually a really difficult question because it touches on questions of what does it mean to be inclusive?
Yeah.
What does it mean to give people opportunities? And I think that is something that is an intersectional problem that's not just about being a woman. I think that going into game design is something that begins with who's playing the games. I don't think that you can go out and scout and find like, ooh, I have found a female game designer, because it's not gonna happen naturally. I became a game designer because I was part of the gaming community, and I felt like I belonged to that community sufficiently that I felt I had something to say enough to design a game for the community. So if people aren't playing the games at the convention level, at the game store level, at the house level, it's never going to happen. And I actually think that, I hope, optimistically, that we will see more female game designers because the community is slowly diversifying, which means that you're gonna have that higher statistical chance that you're gonna convert somebody from a player to a designer. And of course, I think also that this is something that I'm just lucky because my dad is like a feminist in the very traditional sense of, I was never like made to believe that I had to be or do anything in particular. Every time I told my parents what I wanted, they're like, sure, you go for it, honey. Like, including, I want to major in classics in school. Like, you know, it really helps to have the support at home, but that sort of general support for your dreams, you have to think about when you encounter young people or new gamers. How are you talking to them? Are you talking to them like, oh, it's cute that you play games? Are you taking their ideas seriously when they want to tell you something, or when they want to give you feedback, or when they like want to kind of join the conversation? And like, that's such a hard thing to change because it's happening on the micro level. And so I thought about that a lot as a teacher as well, because, you know, students come in your classroom and it's like, okay, what message am I sending my students in my Latin classroom about who gets to study Latin? Who does the legacy of the Roman world belong to? How do I present an empire that colonized people to students in a way that justifies our interest in it, but is also extremely real? And I think that gaming also has a lot of those issues. Like when you have a girl come into your game store, you know, I've had lots of, my boyfriend thinks this is very funny. We'll go to GameStop and he'll get something for the Switch and I'll get something for like our PlayStation, and people absolutely assume that I'm buying the game for him. Or I went to a game store at one point. I won't name names because it's a great game store otherwise. But like I had a copy of Codenames and then a box of Dragon sleeves for a different game. And the person was like, "You are aware that these sleeves will not fit the little cardboard things in Codenames, right?" I'm just like, oh God. And so it's all those little things, right? So you as a gamer, I think we all individually have a responsibility to think about how we're treating people who are new to the hobby. Because there is a huge instinct to be like, well, I'm here and I know what I'm doing, and you should think of me as an authority when I talk about games. We all need to think about how we are treating the stranger and the neophyte as they enter the hobby, and who we're assuming is capable, and who we're treating like somebody who has an opinion that matters. Because I think that ultimately that aspect of our culture is what's going to convert a player to a designer, or somebody who's like, oh, I'm not a gamer, like kind of like casual thing, into like, hell yeah, I'm here. And I think that is a small thing that we all are responsible for collectively. I'm involved with the Zenobia Award. I think that I'm really, really proud of that work. For those of you who don't know, It's a historical game award where we mentor and encourage gamers from underrepresented populations to make historical games that are like telling their story. And it is awesome. I've seen some absolutely freaking fantastic prototypes over the last few years. A lot of Zenobia Award entries and finalists have done super well. But, you know, that's one approach. You're not going to magically create designers out of nothing if you don't already have a community. And I also personally think that if y'all want to praise, at least from my personal perspective, a female designer for her work, I want you to engage with my game like you took it seriously and not like you played it because a girl made it. Woo!
That's fair. No, I like I said, maybe I worded that a little
No,
wrong.
it's cool.
But hopefully you understand the intent. Like,
yeah.
Like when I bring my wife to Origin, she's like, she feels out of place.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how do we, you know?
Oh no, and in
I know
fairness,
it could be any of them, anyone answering that question. But.
In fair, are there any children in here? Okay, no. I'm following.
Well, there's one in the back.
Cover your ears. Okay, so the other thing is that when David and I make these games, like, I know that I'm being a little shit by making an absolutely straight Hex and Counter World War II game that's about female pilots bombing Nazis. But we almost didn't call the name Game Night Witches because they don't like being referred. They want to be called pilots.
Sure.
And so it's really a game about women who are extremely competent at their job. It's kind of a different thing. Or like in Queen of Spies. There are men in the game. We did deliberately just put like 2 token men in the game because it's funny. So I'm not saying those undercurrents aren't there, but they're not the point. And when you play the game, like the weirdest piece of feedback I got for Night Witches was, I want to feel like a female pilot. And I'm like, I don't know how to make you feel like that. Like, I don't understand. Like, what difference is there once I put you in a plane? But, you know, like, obviously this is a rich topic that's got a lot going on. I just get testy about it because, to me, I'm an artist. I want my work taken seriously. I don't wake up and think about myself as a female game designer. I wake up and think, I'm going to make a game today. So.
No, understood. No, I appreciate your very honest response there, Liz. Thank you for that. Yeah, check out the Zenobia Awards too, as Liz mentioned, because that's actually a pretty cool project. What innovative game mechanics have captured your attention over the past few years, and what new mechanics do you want to see in the near future?
I'll take one here. So for me, one thing that captured my attention was, I think, co-op games using hidden information specifically. I think co-op games are prevalent, growing, budding things, but a lot of them are like kind of shared experiences with quarterbacking problems. And so the hidden information really solves that, and I think takes it up to the next level. So I like to see more of those because I think that's how you do the genre the correct way.
I'll take a stab just because one of the most delightful games I've played in the last couple of years is Alex Knight's Land and Freedom. If you haven't heard of it, that's pretty normal. But it's from Blue Panther. It's just like a print-on-demand game, but it is about the Spanish Civil War. It's a 3-player semi-cooperative game. And it's not really a fancy mechanism. I just like what Alex has done with it. It's a game where you are all trying to both come out on top of the government after fighting fascists, assuming you win, and attempting to fight fascists together. And so the game has something called the Bag of Glory, where you could still win the game even if you don't put that many tokens into the Bag of Glory, because it's kind of a luck of the draw thing at the end. But, you know, the more you do, the more little communist or anarchist or whatever tokens you get to put in there to shape Spain after you theoretically win. But what I like about it is that it helps solve the semi-co-op problem where people will trash the game because they know they're not going to win. Because there's always just an off chance that the voters won't notice how hard everybody else worked and vote you in anyway. The game kind of gets around that and keeps things extremely tight to the end because everybody's still pretty invested, even if their chances are not as high as everybody else's.
Can you speak more to the manufacturing process for board games? That's, I know, kind of a big question, but and you kind of dug into that a little bit, Adam, already.
Yeah. I'll just give you a really quick overview, and feel free to reach out in the future on this one. But really, I think you get the game to its kind of final list of components. You create a quote sheet that has all the components itemized. You send it to a couple different manufacturers. They send you their questions back, and you might need to answer a couple questions, or they send you kind of an estimated cost per unit based on like the production size. So that's kind of like the process overall. When you get into things that are like they're not stock components, that's where you probably open up a bigger dialogue. So my manufacturer and I, we meet probably weekly, in the middle of the night, and we discuss just weird ideas that we have going in the games of how to bring them to life. But yeah.
Real quick here, we'll try, if anyone wants to jump in to talk about revenue models and typical sales channels for board games with you, I think that's kind of a good question. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. So Kickstarter, crowdfunding is a big one. So whether it's GameFound, BackerKit, Kickstarter, or whatever, that's one option. Especially for self-publishing, it's probably the most common way to start. Is you run a Kickstarter, you get some money, you then take that money to do the manufacturing process. Then you have different sales channels after that. So you can go into distribution and sell to retailers. You can sell direct to retailers. You can sell at conventions, even like smaller local ones or big ones like Gen Con. So I think those are kind of the main streams: is crowdfunding, distribution, and then direct to consumer or direct to retail are kind of the four big revenue models, and they all have varying levels of profit. When you're selling to retail, you're selling typically at half off of MSRP. So if my game sells for $70 normally, retailer's gonna buy it for 35. Distribution is usually about 40% of MSRP, so you're gonna need less money, but it's more volume. So it all depends on kind of who you're selling to. You get more or less profit, and then more or less volume with that as well.
Thanks so much for joining the panel. If you haven't already, again, you can feel free to scan in the QR codes to follow Talking Cardboard on YouTube. But thanks so much for attending, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your CONvergeance. So, thank you.